Okay, so let's call the meeting to order and go down the list here of folks. Marcia, we got you. I am here, Todd, Susan, we have you, Dan, Haley, Mike. I guess you kind of halfway count in the attendance here. Neil, Jennifer, and Corbett and Leslie. So we're all good here for an actual quorum if we did anything useful, I guess. So that's good. By the way, another thank you, Neil, for getting more members so we can actually do business that we need to do. That's always really nice. As far as the agenda goes, did we have any additions to the agenda? Dan, I think you had something you wanted to add.
Yeah, I just wanted to have an update on the record about the crusher fine trails and where we ended up with on that. I had a question from OSAC about it, so I just wanted to cover that in the meeting.
Okay. Anything else on the agenda that we need to add or change? Going once, going twice?
Somebody wanted to add the art path. I can't remember.
Yes. Yep. Thank you. Who was it that wanted to add that? I don't remember who was attending that.
Marcia.
Marcia. Okay. Anything else we missed? Okay, are we all good on approving the agenda then? Raise hands. Got it.
I'll say
Okay,
yes, my video's not working.
Okay, so we'll move forward here. Are there any people online, Leslie, that we don't see?
Nope, no attendees at this point in time.
Okay. Sounds good. So Mike, do you want to take it away? We can't hear you, by the way. You're muted, I think.
Now, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Awesome. Okay.
And
so,
can you tell us about how long your update's going to be tonight? Do you have an idea?
I'm hoping I can get through it in about 20 minutes.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
You're on the clock.
Share my screen. All right, let's do this quickly. View mode. Slowly but surely. Okay. I'm going to kill my video just to make sure that we keep my microphone because that's a little bit more important. So here is the agenda that we're going to go through. Just a quick summary of the prioritized needs. We'll talk about park inventory and assessments quickly. Thank you all who helped participate in that work with Logan Simpson. We'll talk about level of service, which is really about the amount of park acreage and the amenities that you have in your system and right sizing it for your community. Equity mapping is another way of identifying, the level of service, but it has the ability to show where there are potential gaps in your system. And then to kind of present to you the concept plan framework and quickly review next steps and milestones. And we'll probably look for some feedback in particular for all of these items, but in particular the concept plans, and then Neil, potentially some feedback from you with regards to how to engage town board because we are not going to be in front of you all on December 14th. So just a reminder, prioritize needs as derived from the feedback from the survey, the conversations I've had with the community via Zoom, as well as other feedback that we've received from Shape Superior. Again, you're actually pretty well distributed. None of this, I think, is a surprise to you, as we mentioned last time. I think the one thing, again, to point out on the low end of the equation is it's not that you don't do that. It's typically a smaller segment of the population that derives that. So we want to strategically invest in those programs. And then, of course, you have the experiences or the amenities that are needed to help kind of match up with those experiences. So again, such things as athletic fields, typically do fall to the low end, but as we said before, it's very age and skill specific. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. It's just that you're strategic about how you do it. So park inventory and assessments. This is the map that has been developed as part of this plan. It will be incorporated into your website, into Shape Superior, into the plan. And this is obviously a snapshot of it, but we have worked to really kind of update your entire GIS layer associated with the inventory of not just where your parks are, but also the amenities associated within them. The inventory assessment, this gives you a very quick rundown of all of your parks, the classification of your parks, pretty much ranging from neighborhood park to community park to regional park. We have a tendency not to necessarily view these in terms of the acreage that defines park classification, but really the amenities, experiences, and the service area draw associated with that. And then we've identified an overall condition rating, and the rating here is, everybody's been to school, A through F. And I think you can all kind of understand how the rating kind of plays out. What we've done with this, just for full disclosure, is we've taken this information and we have gone through with staff as well as, Logan Simpson, to identify an improvement plan for each and every park. This in turn will help kind of set up your CIP. So some of this is just that you need to life cycle replace. Some of it provides opportunities to potentially do something different in your existing park system. So next step is level of service. I will not read all of this to you, but a level of service methodology that's based on population incorporates, an iterative approach with all of these potential variables. Current level of service. If you already have enough adequate parkland, it does not necessarily mean that we should create a land acquisition strategy. Is your condition rating of your park system with your current inventory? Is there a need to really focus dollars on taking care of what you already have versus developing new? Is there opportunity to acquire parkland? Other kind of data sources such as National Recreation and Park Association, Sport and Fitness Industry Association, market potential indices, prioritization of community need, and then a biggie, which is financial sustainability. Can you afford to build it? But more importantly, can you also afford year-over-year cost to operate it and maintain it? So this is your current inventory based on park classification. As you can see from a developed park perspective, you have 100 acres, which equates to about 7.41 acres per 1,000 folks. In terms of open space and conservation area, we kind of separate that out, and I'll explain a little bit more in a bit. But this is not all of the potential, what we would call view shed. This isn't medians. This isn't, landscaping. This is really your open space conservation areas. And that comes in at 55.76 acres per 1,000 folks for a grand total of 753 acres. We do the exact same process for all of your major assets or amenities that exist within your developed parks. Won't necessarily run through all of this with you, other than to say that, you do have, a very amenitized system. When we see, for example, outdoor pools at one for every 6,000 folks or 7,000 folks, that's a lot in a typical community. Picnic shelters being one for less than 1,000 folks, playgrounds being less for 1,000 folks. You have a very highly amenitized system. And this is also something that we have to consider when we think about the financial sustainability of your system. All of this stuff at some point will have to be life cycle replaced, not necessarily within the next 10 years. We've also included indoor facilities for purposes of the plan, given that the 1,500 Colton site will be online towards the end of this plan or shortly thereafter. We've included it as current inventory. We feel like that if we move that into future inventory, it almost immediately becomes outdated. So when we look at recommended level of service, again, this takes into account all of the potential variables. We're recommending a slight increase in terms of your developed park acreage per 1,000 folks. So about almost another half acre per 1,000 folks. Some of this takes into consideration, as you'll see in a bit here, the fact that you have some parks that are coming online, within the next couple of 3 years. In terms of open space conservation areas, we do not make a recommendation based on population. It is purely opportunity driven. And so we know that open space is highly valued in your community. If there is opportunity to acquire open space, then the recommendation, generally speaking, is if it works within the land acquisition guidelines or criteria guidelines that we'll set forth within the plan, then so be it. If you can afford to do it, you can afford to manage it and maintain it, it's important to your community, go for it. But it's not necessarily about being holden to a specific number. We don't want to set an arbitrary number associated with that to determine whether or not you should acquire additional open space. But again, that's a significant level of service and significant amount of acreage within 4 square miles already.
Mike, do you have some benchmarks that you can add to this in the future? How much square foot, I guess how many acres or how many square feet of open space other communities have? So we have, when you say it's a lot, I have no context for that. So just for the next version, just add some context there so we know where we fit.
Well, yes, we absolutely will do that.
Okay.
I would say that the majority of communities that we work in, the amount of open space acreage is less than 10 acres per 1,000 folks.
Okay.
And that's suburbia. I think you're very blessed. There are some communities that are very rural or are very rural in nature, and their entire system is really based on open space conservation areas. That's the anomaly. But when you consider, suburbia, so to speak, which is what you are, 10 acres or more is 10 acres is pretty significant.
Thanks.
Sure. But we will add benchmarking into the plan. And then,
Mike?
yes.
Excuse me, is it the same thing applied then for the recommended service levels of all the other amenities? Are these typical industry benchmarks?
No, what we have done is really tried to customize your amenity recommended level of service using all of those iterative variables. So I'll give you a very specific example. Your playgrounds are one for every 965 folks. The typical number of playgrounds, or one playground for X number of people in an average suburban, park and recreation system, is closer to 1 to every 3 to 3,500. So I think the one thing that we truly understand about your community, as I mentioned before, is that you are highly amenitized. And your community also very much values those amenities as part of your park system. So we want to recognize that and incorporate that into your into the recommended level of service that we've established. So ultimately, what you end up doing is starting to understand where you have opportunities to increase amenities, where you should, and also where you leave well enough alone. So, for example, a small diamond field, you could possibly incorporate a new one of those into your system. But disc golf, no. I mean, most recommended level of service standards for disc golf, which is kind of towards the bottom here, is 1 for every 30 to 40,000 folks in terms of an 18-hole course. So you guys are doing exceptionally well in terms of amenitizing that and setting standards that basically show all meet standards does not make sense for you all. And so that's kind of the framework for this. One thing that we want to consider, though, is given the fact that we've identified that you need additional acreage and that we need additional amenities, we want to recognize that you have parks that are coming online here within the next potential few years. We know that parks 1 and 2 will come online. We know that park 3 is associated with downtown development. And then Town 15 site, which we'll talk about here in a bit as part of concept plan framework, has the potential to come online within the 10-year planning horizon. So we wanted to take that into consideration and say, how does that impact your park acreage? And you can see that when we start to identify the needs that existed prior to and the needs that exist after, and then also consider, is there really any other parkland that you have an opportunity to acquire and develop over the next 10 years? At the end of the day, the development of these future but not yet developed parks will go a long way to meeting your acreage standards over the next 10 years.
Hey, Mike, just a question, and this could be for Leslie as well in terms of the future parks. I don't see the one that included that'll be at the north end of Coal Creek on the toll development, sort of the east side of Tract H. That's not Park 3. I think Park 3 is what we used to call Central Park. And I think there's going to be another one there. You know, a year ago, PROSTAC was working on the quote unquote Area 5 Park or Riverbend Park. And that ultimately ended up as Toll will be building a new park in their area, but it abuts Tract H. I don't know how big it is. It's probably like an acre or two.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Trustee Shaw. We kind of refer to it as the toll playground
Yeah.
because I think that's basically what it's going to be is kind of a small, very small neighborhood, even pocket park type with a playground. But that's a good point. I need to add that in.
Thanks.
Okay, we will do that.
Hey,
But
Mike, and another question for you on the park. So Neil just mentioned this very small park that's going to come online, but it does have, you know, playground and some other things that make it, I guess maybe, my question is, how does that relate to acres versus, you know, if you have a park that's 2 acres with a playground versus 10 acres with the same playground, how does the acres that you're measuring, how is that the right thing to measure?
it works into determining the classification. And so really the park that Trustee Shaw just mentioned is that it's really going to fall into that neighborhood park, or if we wanted to, we potentially could create a new classification that would be a mini park. And so it really would factor into that specific classification. We're talking about less than, you know, maybe an acre, maybe a half an acre. So it's not going to have any major significant impact on, number one, the amount of acreage that you're going to provide per 1,000 folks. But it also won't necessarily move the dial one way or the other in terms of meeting the needs. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just trying to understand because like if we had a very large park that most of it wasn't really useful for, say, little kids to play on, not sure how that adds into, you know, you have lots of open space versus certain amenities that they're after that can be bundled pretty small.
Yeah.
I'm
And
just
so,
wondering if there's a way to, do we really need more playgrounds and amenities and specific things like that, or do we need actually more acres?
so I think that's a really good point. I think the one thing that I think we have to fully recognize is that
We're losing you, Mike.
these parks, I believe that we're showing.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah, hold on one second. How about? Can you hear me now?
You're good now.
Okay. So I think the one thing to recognize is that, and I think where I was going with my comments is that's where we start to identify the amenity needs. But I'm going to actually run through what I would call, you know, this does the exact same exercise based on what's planned in each of these parks. And how then that impacts your needs that still need to be met. So what I wanted to do, though, maybe to answer your question a little bit more, Todd, is to kind of walk through the equity mapping that takes these spreadsheets and starts to identify how well you're serving your community with the amenities that you have. And I think one of the things that you will see significantly is that you have, as I said before, you're highly amenitized. So the equity mapping is the methodology is fairly simple, but it needs explanation. So basically, we establish a service area, and it's established by the quantity of the inventory of each site. So this could be the size of the park acres, or it could be the number of, say, tennis courts at North Pool Park, where you have 4 there. And that's extended then in uniform radius until, whatever that population density is around that specific park and or amenity based on the recommended standard that I just showed you. So the shaded areas you'll see that are basically you have coverage of your community. Unshaded areas typically are those that you don't have coverage for specific parks and or specific amenities. However, and you'll see to the southern part of your community, which is really a lot of open space, you're not necessarily looking to need to serve that area because you don't have people living there. And so the unshaded areas really are just about, do you have an opportunity within those unshaded areas to develop parks? So this is your current system map, just a dot map. And you can see you actually have really strong, just based on dots, not even getting into acreage, but just based on dots, you have really good coverage north, you have really good coverage, in the center of the community and south. So when you just look at it from a dot map exercise perspective, you can see that you have good geographic distribution of your parks within your residential areas of your community. So what does this look like in terms of neighborhood parks? Well, obviously you have a lot of neighborhood parks. This is your coverage. And you have great coverage across your entire community when it comes to neighborhood parks. When we add in the future neighborhood park, that's the pink dot or the pink circle there that completely overlaps a lot of your existing parks within the center and northern part of your community. You can see that you have some area, you basically are covering again the areas that you're already serving. These areas down here to the southern end of your community, all of this is open space. Nobody's really living here of significance that you need to worry about serving from a developed park system perspective. Community parks, again, really good coverage. Some areas a little bit here, and maybe a little bit here in your community, but for the most part, again, really good coverage. When we add in, when you kind of add in the Town 15 site, you start to see that you close a little bit of a gap here, but that's really about it. In terms of regional parks,
Hey, Mike, can I stop you for just a second? Oh, maybe you're going to answer it. I was just going to say that, like, down in the area by the Bell Flatiron Apartments and that, you're not counting any of the privately owned parks
No,
in this, right?
we have not factored that in. We're looking at what's publicly accessible.
Got it.
Okay. So regional parks, pretty good coverage in the center of the community, but definitely lacking a little bit north. When we add in the regional park that is going to be developed, you can see that helps to close that service area gap. So if I were to overlay all of these maps and all of the circles, I think you would identify that really the only gap, when not that every park classification needs to serve every part of your community. That's a perfect world scenario. But if we were to overlap pretty much all of these circles, I think you would identify that you have pretty significant coverage and overlapping coverage within your community. So disc golf courses, this will be the same exercise, and I'm going to run through these pretty quickly. but disc golf, again, really good coverage in your community. Small diamond fields, this is where you can see that you have that need to kind of serve the center and southern part of your community. This is where we start to see a gap. Large diamond fields, this is, you have great coverage pretty much all of your community. Small multi-purpose fields, again, this would be an opportunity in the northern part of your community, which is the exact opposite of what we saw from the small diamond fields. Large multi-purpose fields, but again, that helps to start to contribute to create some of that, help circumvent some of the gap that's associated with small. But again, if you were to look at both of these, you could see if you put both of them together that you would have great coverage for multi-purpose fields. Small football fields covered, large football fields covered. Dog park, you have the one, and you do have gaps north and south associated with that. Tennis courts, one thing I will point out is we have changed the recommended level of service for tennis courts. This was just done the other day, and it was part and parcel because we had a conversation with staff about the inability to really run programs. Not enough tennis courts during the summertime. So we actually have recommended one for every 3,000 folks. That will shrink this circle and identify a couple of needs to be met for tennis courts. Outdoor basketball courts, pretty good coverage, a little bit in the center part of your community. Outdoor volleyball courts, great. Picnic shelters, really good coverage and overlapping coverage. One small little segment here in the community. The Town 15 site is kind of in this little, corner of McCaslin and Colton. So if we were to able to locate one or two potential picnic shelters as part of that concept plan, you would have be able to close that gap. Pickleball courts, this site here. So a little bit of coverage needed up north. But again, I think it's also important to recognize your travel time is not significant to get from one end of town to the other most times of the day. Playgrounds, really good overlapping coverage with the exception of this downtown area to the east. Skate park, great coverage. Bike challenge course, great coverage. Outdoor swimming pools, great coverage. And indoor rec facility where Colton will be, you will end up with some really, really good coverage there as well. So that is the level of service and the equity mapping. I'll stop there and see if you have any questions.
One thing that just
Okay.
came to mind is when you said outdoor swimming pools, great coverage. And then when we look at surveys from the community, it seems like there's an outcry for more and better. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand how those two go together.
Yeah, I think the thing is that it's and that's what we're going to get into with regards to the concept plans. And one of our thoughts is how do we address aquatics? It's a high need both from a competitive and a rec pool perspective. We recognize that Town 15 might be the last beacon of light in terms of significant park acreage around which you can add to that and or somehow some way maneuver some things around, so to speak. So let me I will you're right out in front of me there, Todd. I appreciate that. So the concept plans that we are really going to look at are the Town 15 site and the North Pool Park site. So Logan Simpson is really kind of looking at developing through their scope 2 high-level concept plans. Not going to be a significant amount of detail, but to give you an opportunity to see how we can potentially meet some of these needs from an amenity perspective. We already know that the Town 15 site, Park 1, Park 2, the Toll Park site, and Park 3 are going to go do a good job of meeting needs related to park acreage. But how can we look at these two sites to help meet some of these needs here? So let me start by saying there's a couple of things that we wanted to kind of immediately take off the table when we were considering pools and recreation centers. So the recreation center potentially at Town 15. Simply, we have decided, now you all can direct us otherwise, but we have decided that you have a community of 13,000 folks that is going to grow to 17,000 folks in the next 15 years. A typical indoor recreation center with the amenities that you all would be seeking: indoor pool, fitness center, gymnasium space, maybe some multi-purpose space. The minimum size would be about 30,000 square feet, which is significant when you start to also factor in the parking acreage or needs for that at Town 15. But when we think about the capital costs associated with that, it's somewhere between 12 and $18 million. But then also when we factor in the operating costs, which are $1 million plus, usually it's about $1.5 million annually for every 50,000 square feet of space that you construct, especially if you're talking about having an indoor pool. So we have kind of taken that off the table for the Town 15 site. We recognize that recreation center is a high priority, but I also think that the survey results might change in a year if we were to do the survey again, because the 1500 Colton Road site will be open and available to the community, hopefully outside of COVID times. The second decision that we have made is the South Pool Park. We have made a decision because that is your recreation swimming pool. It's not really designed to be a lap pool like your North Pool is. And so our recommendation there is to reinvest in that and not divest of it. And what I mean by that is given the location of this park, it's really adjacent to a ton of open space. And it potentially might have the opportunity for you to develop it in such a way that complements the open space connection. However, your community has a high need and unmet need that they want you to continue to offer in terms of rec swimming. And getting rid of that pool just does not make a lot of sense. We feel like it would be a non-starter based on your community values. So the recommendation is going to be, given the age of that pool, to do a comprehensive facility and infrastructure assessment of it. And then based on that assessment, take the appropriate steps to reinvest in the pool so that it remains a viable recreation option for the community for the next 25 to 30 years. Let me stop there and see if you have any questions, concerns, comments, suggestions about these decision points.
So Mike, does that mean a reinvention of this pool in a dramatic way, or what does this mean if I read between the lines?
Well, you only have about 2.29 acres to work with. And some of that acreage is going to be taken up by parking. But I think and I don't want to tell stories, but I ran into this very kind of situation living on Leslie's side of the table. And one of the very first steps that you want to understand is if you just reinvested in the pool based on its existing footprint and its experiences, how much would that cost you? Is it $1 million? Is it $3 million? Is it $500,000? We are looking at this through the lens of how can this pool continue to provide the value and the services for the next 10 years. But I think that facility and infrastructure assessment will give you an understanding of how long the existing pool can last. And if it's only going to last 5 years, you may get yourself in a position where the amount of money that you would spend to just reinvest and provide the existing experiences, the ROI may not be what you want it to be. You start getting into, $1, $2, $3 million just to bring the pool up to snuff from an infrastructure perspective, so that it's going to last you 25 years, may not necessarily be worth that investment if you could, let's just say, scrape it and start over, and build a new pool for 5 or 6 million. So the infrastructure assessment is really, really critical to making the decision, the strategic decision about, do we just reinvest in an existing facility? Do we try to expand its services because the infrastructure assessment comes back not too bad? Or do we, just kind of want to start over? The point of reinvesting and not divesting is really about saying that continue to provide recreational swimming at the South Pool Park site. What that looks like in terms of the actual aquatic experience is something yet to be determined.
Mike, this is Sarah. When you guys are talking about reinvesting, is this also like the opportunity for the town to maybe look at this pool as the year-round pool? Because I know in the past, the town has looked at popping a top on the north pool and it didn't go anywhere. And I'm not talking maybe popping a top, maybe we actually build a structure where we can use it year round, but like, is that viable?
The question that I guess I would pose back is, can you hang tight? Because I can address that when we talk about North Pool Park and we talk about Town 15. I would say, yeah, you guys are totally in line with exactly where we're going. So hang tight. Let me get to Town 15. Any other questions about these specific decision points, and/or, do you want us to consider something different? And Sarah, hang tight because I will address the bubble.
Yeah, and then since we're talking about South Pool Park, did anything come up with about the skate park that's there, like the smaller skate park?
I think that is something that we have to go back and do the look at that park. The way we had originally approached talking about the park by park improvements is that we were considering going into doing something different with the South Pool Park site. And so we then kind of towards the end of the meeting made the decision to say, you know what, we're gonna keep that pool there, and it makes a lot of sense for a lot of different reasons. We now have to go back in and look at the rest of the infrastructure in that park to make sure that we want to continue with the experiences that it provides or do something different.
Because what I've heard back from the community is the skate park that was recently built is so popular that it's nice to have the other skate park that's smaller for like the younger kids to use.
Yep. And
Okay.
and I think that's great information, and we will take that into consideration when we think about what are the improvements that we need to make over the next 10 years. And when I say improvements, I don't mean we're talking necessarily wholesale changes or changing out a skate park for something else. It could simply be that we need to do some work to life cycle replace some of the amenities, or just reinvest lightly in them. So that your point is well taken, and I'm jotting that down as a note to continue to look at keeping that skate park there. Any other questions, concerns, comments, suggestions? Okay, so let's talk Town 15. Maybe. Okay. Well, this is the South Pool Park site. I just kind of wanted to show that to you. This is the outline of it, the white line. You can see the majority of the park there is really the pool and the parking lot, and you do have some open space. But as I mentioned, we'll have to go back in and look at the edges, so to speak, to see if there's any other potential improvements that we need to make. In addition to, do we need to do some modifications or upgrades to the skate park over the next 10 years, just simply because of life cycle replacement. All right, so this is the Town 15 site. It's blank. It's a blank canvas. And so we do have some homes here that we would want to consider creating a significant buffer for. But we also have, some trails that kind of dead end here as well that create some nice connectivity. So what we're considering for the Town 15 site is, well, let me jump ahead to the North Pool site. So this is your North Pool site. It's also where you have tennis courts. It's also where you have a really small parking lot. It's also kind of in a neighborhood, so to speak. And it does create a lot of traffic in and out. So what we are considering for Town 15 is to relocate this pool to Town 15 and develop an outdoor aquatic facility that kind of leans competitive. And why I say that is because that's what this pool is now. It doesn't mean that it won't have any recreational elements to it. But we also would consider adding a facility associated with it that would be serve as kind of a bathhouse or locker rooms, dry land exercise space for competitive swim teams, and party room or party rooms that would allow the pool to function a little bit differently than it functions now in terms of providing experiences. We would consider this to be kind of a 3 to 4 season use. But again, this is where that bubble concept comes into play, that this might be one of those facilities that you could build a full indoor facility. You could build a facility with a retractable roof, or you could simply bubble it. It was likely going to end up kind of being sited in this part of the park, just simply because it's where a lot of the active activity and a lot of parking would end up being. And it also provides a really nice, front door, at this intersection. So the other side of the park, this backside, maybe up towards this area here, we would consider athletic field. So maybe that's a small baseball field, maybe it's a small multi-purpose field, maybe it's both. The other thing that we would want to try to accommodate here is parking. And these are the parking needs that we have identified during our conversations with everybody. Number one, if we build an aquatic facility, we have to have the parking to associated with that. Athletic fields, we would have to have the parking for that. But we also know that that site right now is also special event parking overflow for events that occur at Community Park. So we would still want to be able to accommodate that. We also are considering potential special events at the Town 15 site in and of itself. So that's another potential parking need. And then, of course, general park use. And what I mean by that is in addition to that neighborhood buffer, we still would have the opportunity to potentially incorporate public art, a restroom facility, maybe concession stand associated with the athletic field, internal loop trails, walking paths, a playground, picnic shelters. And then we kind of would be able to meet a lot of these needs. If you bubbled the pool, year-round swimming, competitive and rec, athletic fields, parking to support multi-purposes, picnic playground, picnic shelters, playgrounds, internal walking trail. That is a lot of the needs that we've identified here, but also needs that have been expressed by the community as well. Any questions on Town 15? I can go forward show what we would then propose to do with North Pool Park site, and then maybe field the questions as an entire conversation, since both work hand in hand. So again, one thing to kind of point out is this is, there's some slope here. So it's not necessarily what we would consider to be developed land. Where your footprint of all your active activity right now, from parking to pool to bathhouse to tennis courts to playground, is really your flat land. So what we're considering here is, if we remove this pool and we relocate it to the Town 15 site, make it bigger, make it better, possibly allow it to be a bubble for year-round swimming, we would remove that. And then what we could do is make this kind of your tennis court, potential pickleball court area as well. So we think that we would easily be able to take this kind of footprint associated with the tennis courts and put it here. One other thing to note that Leslie mentioned to me is that you all are investing upwards of $200,000 in tennis court lights. So you're really defining this park as the place to go play tennis in your community. Let's just add value to that by adding a couple more courts, or maybe you can add 3. I'm not a landscape architect, but maybe you add 3 tennis courts, but maybe one of them becomes a pickleball court, where you actually can put 4 courts on that as well. So 4 pickleball courts fit on one size tennis court. We wouldn't necessarily then have to do much with parking. We could reinvest in the playground, reconfigure the loop trail, and away we go. And potentially add you might need to add a restroom facility. You would probably need to modify the looping trail or the loop trail, and then also potentially add a picnic shelter as well.
So Mike, just a quick question. I mean, before we spend the $175,000 on the lighting for the tennis courts, we got to decide what we want to do.
Yeah.
All right.
And I think that's a really good point, because if you do decide that you want to move quickly, I would say the one thing that you want to consider is, if this is the decision, if this is the direction that you all go, you're going to want to build the pool here first before you get rid of this pool.
Yep.
Just so that you have a place to offload all the usage. Then you would come back in and then do the tennis courts here. So again, that's a sequencing of events that would have to take place. If you spend the tennis court money light, you certainly would want to at least have the electrical infrastructure potentially in place to add to that lighting, to light these tennis courts if you put them here.
Got it. Thanks.
Sure. Questions, concerns, comments, suggestions? Right track? Other things to consider?
Well, this is Sarah again, and like getting rid of the North Pool and then relocating it, and then the population of the town is increasing significantly with all the new development that's going in. What about the model of keeping the North Pool and also having another pool?
I think I think one of the challenge, I mean, you certainly could do that. I just think there's a lot of cost in running pools. I mean, there's nothing to say that you can't have 3 pools in your community. I would think, though, if you did that, Sarah, you're going to be in the same position that you did with the, that you're going to have to do with South Pool, which is, because of the age of the facility, you're going to want to, do an infrastructure assessment of it and determine how best you could reinvest in it. And you potentially would do something completely different here. I'll just throw an idea. Town 15 site becomes kind of your competitive pool site, and then you end up with rec oriented pools at North Park and South Park.
And then I also think like the North Pool gets taxed because we don't have any pool facility. Like they just lowered it last week because I think they had a high school team using it. Like, so I know that it costs a lot to run the pool, but like this pool gets used significantly. And if there was another pool that was a 3 to 4 year, 3 to 4 season, then this North Pool wouldn't be as taxed. And it wouldn't, I don't know.
I would agree. I still think you're going to have to look at some level of investment. You can't look at the pool as it exists today and think that it's going to, maybe it'll get you another 10 years, maybe not. But that's why I think you would want to do that infrastructure. The other thing is I think the one thing to consider when you think about the utilization of this, the North Pool right now, I think you have to take that into consideration when you design and build a pool. If you design and build a pool for the Town 15 site, doesn't mean that you're just going to take this exact kind of facility and move it to Town 15. You would likely need to do something bigger and better there, especially given the fact that you have the acreage there to do it, so that you would have the ability. Leslie, can you refresh my memory? This is an 8-lane pool right now.
It's a 9-lane pool.
9-lane pool. Okay. You could do such things as a 25 meter by 25 yards. You could do 50-meter pools. There are all kinds of things that you could potentially do that you at a Town 15 site that would increase utilization capacity that you can't do here. So again, it's really about understanding. Ultimately, I would highly recommend that if you chose to make a strategic decision or at least pursue relocating or even just building a pool at Town 15 site, I think you would want to understand exactly what you were just getting to, Sarah, which is how does the entire aquatic system work together? And what's the outcome expected? What's the utilization? Who are you trying to serve with each one of these sites? That in turn will give you an understanding of what are the elements that potentially would go into the Town 15 site. It would give you an understanding of how do you reinvest in the North Pool and South Pool sites as well. Sometimes we end up being a little short-sighted and say, let's just do a feasibility study for the Town 15 site. And then we forget about the fact that we still have these other 2 pools that are in our system that we have to take care of. So again, my suggestion would be, and my recommendation, if you're okay with moving forward with a concept of looking at a pool at the Town 15 site, that you immediately would want to do infrastructure assessments on the 2 existing pools, understand how quickly you need to move to reinvest in those so that they just don't, take a turn for the worse for you and end up having less pools. And then at that time, you have all of the information that's necessary to really do what I would call a mini aquatic system master plan, so that you understand the outcomes and relationships of each site and how best and what the costs would be, both capitally and operationally, and what the outcomes are going to be in terms of the experiences provided at each pool.
Hey, Mike, just as I was looking at your picture on the screen right now and thinking through where people live and kids walking to the pool and things like that, if you were to, I guess, have you considered getting rid of the tennis courts here instead of getting rid of the pool, expanding the pool and making this a pool only area that has more parking and a larger pool, and moving the tennis courts to Town 15 that might be, I don't want to say there may be a better match for Town 15, but it's less developed. And also people that are going to be playing tennis. I'm not saying little kids don't, but a lot of older people would do that as well. And it might make more sense for people, older folks that are going to be playing tennis more, to be able to go to a town 15, and the kids that are in that surrounding community to be able to walk to the pool. Have you considered something like that?
You know, we did toss that around as an option, and we actually kind of thought that you all would bring that up as well. We're just trying to keep this somewhat simple, but that is a potential option. I do think that, you know, if you did get rid of these, here's what I would suggest. I think it's pretty easy to kind of look at this and say, well, you know what, just take the north pool and move it, you know, to the east where the 2 adjacent tennis courts are, take the parking lot and expand it to the other 2 tennis courts and be done. My suggestion would be is to consider, if you're going to go that route, I think you would want to do a complete new.
We're
We
losing you,
lost
Mike.
you.
Can you hear me?
You're back.
Okay. I would say if that is a desire, then I think then what you would want to do is kind of wipe the slate clean. I think you have your entrance point, and your parking would likely end up in kind of the same spot. But is it better for the parking to move into the pool area, or is it more, or would it be better for it to move into the tennis court area? So I would say that you would certainly want to kind of take a look at that. So is your direction for us to consider, I'll put it this way, to consider 2 options for town 15, one that includes a pool there and the other that would include the tennis courts there, and then 2 options for North Pool Park, which would be the exact same thing?
Well, I would certainly say at least look at that, because it just seems both of those things would be more compatible with the areas. And if we shift it and we put the pool out kind of away from where kids are living and easy to walk to, I don't know. My gut just tells me that the tennis courts are more compatible to town 15 than a big pool facility is.
I'm in agreement with that.
Second that.
I guess my only consideration would be if you do revamp North Pool to expand the pool facilities there, are you going to lose your pool for a while? I mean, if you have to.
Likely.
So then you've already got, then you have 1 facility instead of 2 for however long it takes you to redo that whole site.
That would be the short-term pain with that option, yes.
Versus having a brand new space, come over here, cool pool. And, I mean, it may not, I think the walking, that is a factor, but yes, short term.
Do you happen to have a chart available that shows, or I really like the way you did the maps where you showed the coverage of the pools. What I was wondering is, would moving the pool to town 15 create kind of a pool desert in the north?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had the same
No.
question, Dan.
Yeah, it wouldn't. I mean, the only way it would create a pool desert, let me see if I can find the swimming pools. Okay, so basically, I think you're 1 pool. So again, your community has these 2 pools. Most communities of your size maybe have 1 pool. And in many cases don't have any, because they just rely on their HOA pools and don't provide anything publicly accessible. But again, I've made the recommendation for 1 pool for every 25,000 folks. But I mean, I could move that recommendation to 1 for every 10,000 folks. And yes, you would end up with likely this part of your community not being served. but you have significant overlap here. Most communities that we do these master plans for, we recommend one outdoor pool for every 50,000 people. So again, I repeat, you are highly amenitized, and your community very much values that. So it doesn't behoove us to move in the direction of trying to get rid of a pool. But yeah, it would probably be similar. It would probably look somewhat similar to kind of what this looks like right now, where you kind of have this gap up north. But again, your question or your town 15 site is where the little hand is.
So Mike, the radius of these circles, I mean, you obviously used, some metric for the radius of the circles to cover 25,000 people. And I think what a lot of people are asking is, what is that metric? Because we know within our community, a lot of people walk to the pools. There's no one walking to the pool from original town, even though it's in the circle, because geometry wise, obviously you can draw a circle around anything, but the reality is, with the location of the pools, people have oriented, how they get to the pools based on where they are. And I think what we're suggesting here is if by using town 15 as a singular location, you could actually get rid of both pools because it would still work with these geometric circles of covering 25,000 people, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
And yeah, your point of the walkability, and if that's a community value, then I would I think one of the things that we could do is to identify what's a 10-minute walk or a 15-minute walk look like to each of these pools.
And I think
not how the crow flies, but
yeah, and I think when you flip through these circles earlier, I thought that's how they were sort of set up in terms of what's the commute time to get to these locations, depending on your form of transportation. But now I realize they're based on humans, the number of humans that live within a circle.
Correct. Population density. Correct.
Right. And quite honestly, none of us care about Louisville really when it comes to who's in the circle. It's more about how do we maximize the ability for people in Superior to get to them, and make them convenient.
Yeah, if you want, I mean, I can easily send a couple of maps that identify a 10-minute walk to each one of these pools, and potentially identify what that 10-minute walk looks like to the town 15 site.
I think something like that would be really helpful in just understanding what does this, not can it accommodate all of the population, but what does it feel like as a community to use it?
Right. Yeah, the question is really, and I would almost defer to Leslie to answer this, but of the users of each one of these pools at South Pool and at North Pool, what is the amount of use based on walking to it versus driving to it?
I don't know. I'd have to guess. We do get pretty good usage of people walking and biking to the location, but I think we still get more folks who drive just because they, have a whole family. But yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think it's both. I live not that far from the North Pool, and I've seen tons of people walking there, but also lots of cars, especially when they have swim meets.
Yeah, I think the one thing that we have to consider is that your North Pool is much more of a competitive pool, which means it draws from a much larger service area. Your South Pool is much more of a rec pool, and likely is servicing primarily that end of town. Irregardless of what the circles look like, or irregardless of what the 10-minute walk or 10-minute drive time looks like, just by nature of the experiences provided between the two pools, you likely would have, if you had more drive if you had more driving, it would be more driving to North Pool than to South Pool.
I would say in my experience also that a lot more of the older crowd, the teens, whatnot, hang out at the North Pool, North Pool, not North Pole, the North Pool, and the younger kids hang out at the South Pool because of the amenities offered at each. So there's already kind of division between the two pools from the crowds they get. And, you know, I mean, we don't expect the younger kids to kind of walk longer distances, but if they don't live around there, they're going to drive there. The older kids, they're going to do whatever they want and end up wherever they want.
I was going to second that and say anecdotally, I live off of Coal Creek. And me and all of my neighbors in this area who have young children, we drive to South Pool because of the amenities, and that is the more fun pool for kids. We go to North Pool if we couldn't get into South Pool, but I think there definitely is a use differentiation there, and that if you have young kids and live on the north side of town, you're not adverse to driving to South Pool because that's the experience you want out of the facility.
And so if you were to add sort of the equivalent of South Pool onto the side of the North Pool and have it available for older kids to have more, I don't know, older kid things going on, a square pool to play in, and some more interesting thing with a slide and other amenities for little kids, it seems like you could sort of address some of that driving and get rid of it so that people are going more locally instead of driving across town both ways.
I think you get a lot more use of the North Pool recreationally. But again, the North Pool is super taxed competitively. You know, Rock Creek Swim uses it, Masters Swim uses it, the local high schools around here uses it, Elevations uses it for competitive swimming. So, but I'm not opposed to it. You know, making it more fun, making it bigger, all of that stuff.
You all are diving into kind of exactly what I was referring to when you start to think about kind of a mini aquatic system master plan and the relationship between uses, outcomes, location, and really kind of making sure that whatever you do from an aquatic perspective, whether it's 2 pools, whether it's 3 pools, whether the locations are that you have the facilities to meet the outcomes and the experiences that people want. And then the other determining factor is kind of what you're referring to, which is location and walkability versus or drivability.
Sarah, to the question of how taxed North Pool is and how much use it gets from various swim groups, it seems like the only resolution to relieving that stress on that facility would be a 3rd pool, like just expanding this pool and adding more lanes and increasing it. Would that I guess I'm not seeing how would that relieve stress on that pool, or would it just actually increase stress because now you've got a bigger, better pool that could handle it? Not being a competitive swimmer, I just don't know what that landscape looks like.
Again, I think that I'm the swimmer on this panel, and I think that, you know, this is just my 2 cents. I think this town could probably, if we had a 3rd pool, I don't know what the expenses of running it 3rd pool is, but it would get used, it would get utilized. And I think that if we actually made it like a competitive pool, because Boulder doesn't really have one, like the closest competitive pool we have is VMAC. I'm not saying that we need to build a VMAC, but we could, if we build a 3rd pool and not just think of our community, but think of Boulder County as a whole, I think it would get a lot of use, and not just from the town, but as the county, and maybe supplement the income in that sense. But I'm talking as a swimmer.
Yeah, I just pulled up the amenity needs, and you can see that aquatics, both recreation wise and competitive wise, are in high priority, which means that people don't just need it, and people don't just find it important, but there's also a high level of unmet need. And then you can see even aquatic facilities that just deals with splash pads and water play features is in the middle. And that's what's really interesting about that is it kind of underscores what you're saying, Sarah, about the value of swimming in your community. Splash pads and water play features really are for, not completely, but they're very much geared towards the under 6 crowd.
Mike, I feel like you said this last time, and I know we've gone way over the amount of time that Todd was anticipating here. With respect to the other communities you guys have worked with, are we one of the few, if not the only, that do not charge for the pools? Is that feeding some of the perceived need that we need more because they're free? Or is it, if we were charging more here, would that potentially change the dynamic?
It's all supply and demand, right? I mean, I don't think that the value of your aquatic facilities being free, or even if you charged a couple of bucks, is going to make a difference.
Okay.
A lot of times we see that free stuff, doesn't quite get the use that something that pay to play is, because the perceived value isn't great. So yeah, I mean, it could have some factor into it, but if your community is identifying that it has unmet needs at such a high rate for aquatics, I think if you were to charge for that to help meet that need, I don't think people are going to bat an eye, especially when you consider your income levels in your community.
Right. Thanks.
So Mike, I'm gonna, I guess at this point ask, how much longer do you think we have? Because we're gonna have to probably do less deep diving on the pools and move forward here. Maybe we have to take this offline. I don't know, but we have a lot of other business we have to cover tonight as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, Leslie and I'll circle back on where we go with the concept plans. But I think your feedback has been valuable. It's just a matter of trying to figure out what we deliver within the scope that we have. So let me, I have your notes. Leslie has your notes. We'll convene tomorrow to determine exactly the direction that we're going to go. And then we'll go from there. So these are the kind of the next steps over the next 5 months. Now I just had a slight change. We were originally not going to present a high level summary of this information to the town board on December 14th. We were going to move that to January 11th, but that's now back on December 14th. So Trustee Shaw, I apologize. You'll have to kind of sit through an abbreviated version of this.
No, and Mike, I'm the reason why it moved while you were presenting. It was on the agenda for for December 14th, and it came off. I asked to put it back on. I want this to come to the board as soon as possible because I don't want you having to get reined back in the direction that you're already working on based on your feedback from staff and PROSTAC. And we'd rather get you in front of the board as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. So here's where we're at. We're going to kind of bring this information to the town board on December 14th. We were going to bring back to you then some draft concept plans on December 16th. And I think we're going to have to, Leslie and I will convene tomorrow to figure out exactly the direction we head with regards to this. The idea, though, was then to take the draft concept plans and post them on Shape Superior to gather public input. I'm not technically all that comfortable with this timeline, but to try and hit the March deadline of trying to get the plan adopted, we're going to try to push really, really hard on getting people's comments a few days before they jump into Christmas and then coming out of the new year. Then we would bring back the final concept plans based on community input and board input on January 20th, and then we'd move forward from there. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, Mike, just some feedback from the board level perspective. I think it is actually really important to go to the town board before you go to the community with the survey. Just we want to make sure that as board members, we don't get asked questions like, why is this in the survey? That we've at least seen where you're at. So I think moving a board meeting into the December 14th and a secondary board meeting sometime in late January, early February before you finalize it is not a terrible thing. I think what Leslie did with the CAPS master plan, if you look at the timeline, I think that worked really well. So if it takes an extra couple weeks to get it done, let's just make sure you got enough touch points with the board and with PROSTAC and the community to get all the information you need.
Okay. Well, Leslie and I will then reconvene tomorrow, not just on the concept plans, but the timeline as well.
Perfect.
One thing also, Mike, to add to this, maybe in looking at multiple concepts, is what's the bill for all this? Because I think that does feed into decisions.
Yes.
And so it's nice to pretend that we have infinite money for all these things, but if there was some reality put into it, it might help sort of zero in on what the decisions need to be.
Yes, and that is something that we were going to do when we posted the concept plans, was to consider a magnitude of cost, certainly not a dialed in cost based on high level concept plans, but based on all of our experience between Logan Simpson and Pros, we feel pretty comfortable with giving you a range of costs for the concept plans, as well as a range of costs for the operations.
That would be great.
Yep. That is certainly something that we wanted to accompany the concept plan, so that folks understood that financial sustainability or feasibility of them.
Well,
All
thank you
right.
for thanks for the update, Mike. I think
Yeah,
it's
sorry,
super
this
helpful.
Yeah, hopefully this is a little bit more meat and potatoes for you all. I appreciate your feedback. And Leslie, you and I can convene tomorrow.
Hey, before we let Mike go, are there any other comments on or questions that we want him to come back and answer? I don't hear anything. So thank you, Mike.
You're welcome. Thanks, folks. Have a great night.
Well, a question for you guys on timeline. This 20-minute thing turned into an hour or a little more. Helpful use of our time to let it spill like that. It seems to me like we almost have to dedicate the time to this. Any other thoughts?
I agree. There was tons of information there. I'm not sure how to, I mean, it would have been nice. Maybe we could have reviewed it ahead of time, maybe to try to cut down on the amount of time you needed to spend doing it. But I think we need to look at it all.
So for the next meeting, if we ask to get the slide deck ahead of time that we can kind of peruse, I think that'd probably be good feedback to give to him.
Yep.
I also think that if we need to save on time, some of the updates, could just be sent out via email. And if it's just kind of there, Pros is just providing us information on it. So maybe we could do that as well.
Yep, good feedback. Okay, moving on. So we're gonna have to rock and roll here on some next points. So moving on to PROSTAC and OSAC moving forward plan. So I have talked to Ryan, and I actually haven't talked to him since they had their meeting. And so I haven't looked at their meeting as well, so I don't know what they may have talked about. So I'm just going to give you guys kind of a heads up on those discussions and where that's at here. And essentially, it kind of looks like this, is at least what the thinking is. And so obviously, this is a major work in progress. And what we're trying to do is have clear definition of who's responsible for what with as little overlap as possible. And so the thought is kind of three things: separating the trails so that there's clear responsibility of those trails to different groups without having to overlap those things. And the thinking is that the trails that are in green here that are really open space trails or open space related trails, that OSAC would be responsible for trailheads, trails, all of the things that have to do with that. The PROSTAC group would be responsible for all of the trails, if you will, or sidewalks or whatever you want to call them, the connectivity in really the core of the town, and all of the trails and sidewalks that are in the parks proper. And so what you see here is the green is the kind of the ones that would be OSAC related. The yellow would be the ones that would be PROSTAC, and then there's a lot of them obviously that aren't on here, that the parks would be understood to be PROSTAC, and any other open space trails Like there's a lot of them up in the new CenturyLink property and things like that. So all of that's just understood. The green and the yellow were just sort of the touch points that were close. Then there's purple, which were some question marks. The Zaharias property there, that's kind of the sideways V, that would just be dependent on what that property ends up being. If it's open space property, it would be an OSAC thing. If it's more in town like feel, it would be a PROSTAC. And then there's a couple other little purple lines on the fringe, but kind of in concept, that is what we're looking at as delineating those things. Any thoughts on that from any of y'all?
It makes sense to me.
I agree.
Okay, any naysayers that say this is just a terrible idea and how to split up the responsibilities? Not hearing any.
Todd, was there anything else, any other areas of focus that they thought we should divide differently?
There are. So there are really three pieces of this. The other
Todd,
piece was,
sorry, I had to find
Yep.
the mute button. The question I have is, I agree with splitting up responsibilities of the trails, and I like the idea. The only question is terms of budget and priorities of trails.
Mhm.
How does that get established? Because there's only so much budget, and are we going to be competing with each other for that budget to, for the trails that are in there? And how is that whole relationship going to work?
I think that's a really good question. And I guess conceptually, this would roll up to the board, and the board would have to make decisions on what is higher priority. And then that gets back to, looks kind of like, well, we need to have some integrated priority list. And so I think that's a really good point, Corbett. And I don't have a really good answer for you. Because ultimately, if we're going to split things up, then there is going to be some competition for funds. So I don't know. Do you have any comments on that, Neil?
I don't, but I think it's actually okay that there be competing priorities. I mean, at the end of the day, the board's got to weigh, sort of amenities with trail enhancements, with sustainability goals and economic development. They're all really important, and it sort of does OSAC and PROSTAC a disservice that the two have had to work together to come up with an aligned list, and then we're still, pitching that against economic development or sustainability goals, right? So here, it does help to, and I think, flatten the number of things that we're looking at a little bit more. But it will mean the board's going to have to lean in a little bit more to understand how this is all interrelated. So not a good answer other than I think it will be better overall for the two groups, but it's going to be messy for sure.
I will say this, it'll at least be fun when we share a booth at the parks and say, no, come look at our trails. No, come look at our trails.
Yeah, I think there's got to be some good answers there somewhere so that it doesn't really have to be a arm wrestling match, but ultimately it is a competition for dollars. So I don't know how to get around that. A couple other things to what you were saying, Susan, are programming for everything. In the discussions have been that it really needs to land in one place. It would just make more sense to have programming throughout. So even programming in the open space and all of that be responsible in one party. And it seems to that would make more sense to be PROSTAC responsible for the programming of everything. And then the other piece of it that we've talked about is wildlife, that wildlife through town and putting more wildlife friendly features even in the parks and things like that would be the responsibility of OSAC. So we're trying to look at who's really responsible for different things rather than necessarily different specific land other than the trails. And so those are the three things that we've talked about. I don't really know if there's other things where we're both trying to do the same thing. Obviously programming, there is the same thing. And then wildlife is something that I think the OSAC group has a passion for, especially in some thoroughfares, through the center of town, and that does go through parks. And I think it would be helpful to have one group responsible for managing that throughout town and thinking about what's best for the wildlife, what's best for the town that way. So far there hasn't been other things that have come up that we bump into each other on. Those are really the three items. how does this feel to everyone? Is this making sense? Any feedback at all on how to better it?
It makes sense to me, especially their passion for wildlife, as you said, to have that be kind of their bailiwick, no matter where it's taking place, because obviously the wildlife doesn't know the difference. I guess I would question how much programming we do on open space. I know there's some Boulder County programs that sometimes take place, and staff has been involved in that. And I didn't necessarily know that either one of our committees was ever involved in those.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has been done by town staff, and these things just magically happen, and they do a really good job of it. So thank you, Leslie and crew, for making that happen. I think the hope is going forward that we can maybe expand on that and do a better job of those things if we have a clear responsibility. And I think with moving forward, one of the things with PROSTAC that we also haven't had a really big hand in programming. And I think moving forward with Town 15, or excuse me, Colton, 1500 Colton, and other areas, there's going to be a lot more of that. And hopefully we can do maybe a better job of helping out town staff with those things than we have been in the past. And then as an extension of that, more help with the programming for open space as well. So Neil, from the board perspective, does this feel like what you're hoping the two groups can come up with, or are you looking for something fundamentally different, or what's this like with you?
This is exactly the kind of collaboration we were hoping for. I mean, we start off with the trails because we all knew they overlap, but then kind of exactly what you went through in terms of wildlife and programming, finding the natural fit for both of them, I think makes a tremendous amount of sense. So this is ultimately what we wanted to see, is that the two organizations, the two committees, can find a way to coexist peacefully and, with as much solid line differentiation as possible. And I think we're getting there.
I think the way I'm looking at this, not to mince words, I guess, Neil, but I'm hoping that it doesn't just get to be something that we can work, live together peacefully, but hopefully we can actually be a whole lot better in focusing on these things differently than we have been. Because it seems like we've spent a lot of time reinventing the wheel, and not even just bumping heads with each other, but just both doing the same thing and wasting a lot of time. And my hope is that we can reutilize that time to focus more on things and get more done for the town. So I guess the way I'm looking at it is, I don't know, maybe you guys have a different feel, but not really that we're bumping heads with OSAC, but let's just be efficient in what we're doing for all of our sakes.
No, absolutely. And I think this is the right way to get there. It was the right time for both committees to kind of reassess how to, revitalize, with how things have changed relative to the focus areas going forward. And I think this is going to be great.
So I think next steps are really to put pencil to paper and define these things very clearly that exist today and will exist in the future. Put some verbiage to those things so that everyone's clear on what they are. We can go to the board. I don't know if this is exactly new charters for each group, but certainly tweaked charters. And then I think probably the name of PROSTAC doesn't make sense from an acronym standpoint when we're not going to be doing open space and all of the trails and things. So be thinking about a new name, because I think that's going to be necessary, and probably just to be more clear for everybody. I don't know about the OSAC if that name actually needs to change, because I think it really is kind of what they're after. So I don't know on that side of it, but on our side, I think we do need a new name for the committee. And to throw one other thing out there, I think people have different passions too on both of the groups. And so I don't know if the 9 of us here have any, looking at this like, man, I wish I was working on the green lines rather than the yellow lines. But be thinking about that, because I think in all of this, with changing the charter and changing what we're responsible for, we want to have people aligned with their passions too, because obviously we're going to have more fun and work harder towards those goals if we are. So if those things are coming to mind, I want you to talk to me or Neil or someone, and we can try to fit bodies where they make the most sense, because I think that's something that we're open to as well in moving forward. As far as timeline goes, I'm not really sure what we can get done with the board, but I think as groups, we can probably at least agree on this fairly quickly. And what my goal at least would be to have this kind of finalized in a month or so that going into 2021, both groups have clear charters. Our work plans can be very clear on what we're going after. I don't feel like this has to take a long time to figure out. So anyway, that's my thought. I don't know, Neil, from a board perspective, what the appetite is to make some quick decisions, but I'd like to stick some stakes in the ground and be moving forward in 2021.
Yeah, I'll be honest, Todd. I was hoping, just given that the next thing on your agenda is a work plan, that we could have had new, sort of revised charters or tweaked charters to the board, ASAP. So whether it's the December 14th meeting, which is probably a stretch, or the first meeting in January, and then that way the work plans that both OSAC and the future to be named PROSTAC or renamed PROSTAC, the work plans don't have to be modified significantly.
So question for you at this point, given where you sit, knowing more what the board is going to say to this, I think from my understanding, at least from Ryan's feedback to me, I think most people are okay with this. I think it feels, not out in left field at least. And so if we were to move forward with work plans from the perspective of something very similar to this is going to be the case, so that our work plans don't really have to change, does that make sense?
It totally does. Yeah, and I mean, obviously we have 2 new board members who have to still get sworn in once the election gets ratified here in a week or so, or finalized or whatever. But I think before that, when we talked about it at the board work session a few weeks ago, everybody was really in strong support of going in this direction. So I don't think there'll be any pushback to having a work plan doesn't track specifically to the existing charter, but one that tracks to the soon to be adopted charter. I think that makes total sense.
Okay, because as you'll see in just a couple minutes, the work plan that I put together is that. So it's good that you said yes. Otherwise, we'd have to just skip that point. Any other thoughts on this come to mind? Going once, going twice. Sold. Okay.
Good
If
job.
anything
Thanks for doing all this.
If anything does come to mind, guys, please speak up. I'm sure there's a whole lot of stuff that we haven't thought about. And so put your thinking caps on, history lessons that I'm not aware of or whatever that have come up in the past. And let's make sure we do a good job of not having overlap. Okay, moving on to the work plan. I sent out a draft. This is draft 0.1. Let's just say that it's, let's call it 0.0.1. It's very raw here. So there's a lot of questions in here. And I just kind of wanted to walk through things that seem to make sense to me. And I also think that a lot of this are really big things, like the new master plan. There's going to be so many things that come out of that that we're really maybe not anticipating, or like this pool discussion that just came up. And I mean, there's so many things and decisions that are going to have to be made coming from that, budget recommendations to the board, and that I feel like there's about 4 times as much stuff on this list you're going to see as we can possibly get done. So I think we're going to have to rein it in. But this is just kind of my thoughts. So as we're going through this, please either speak up now or be thinking about it. But first quarter, let's just run down here real quick. Leadership stuff, we're going to have to make decisions on how we're doing that next year. We have this annual joint meeting with the town board that we have had. We didn't have this year, but we have in the past. I don't know if that's something we're going to be able to do, but I think it would be helpful to maybe sit on a Zoom call or something with the board, even if we can't have a meeting or dinner together or whatever like we've had in the past. Is that something you think that there's going to be time for, Neil, at all? If we could get even half hour, 45 minutes with everyone just to talk through some things. And it's kind of hard because in the same room, you can have, 10 different discussions going at the same time. And here we really can't. So I don't know if that makes sense or not, but is anything like that possible?
Yeah, notwithstanding the pandemic and the Zoom issue, I think one of the things that the board did lose when we sort of dropped the pre-meeting work sessions was this connection to the committees. We had the dinners, and then those just kind of went away because the board just the schedule got too wacky. But Leslie, let's talk. I mean, I really want to bring those back for 2021, just on an annual basis with each of the committees. And obviously, while we're still waiting for COVID to just magically go away, we'll be staring at each other on little tiny boxes. But at some point, we will be back to normal. And I do want us to get to a point where the board can meet face to face with all the committee members on a regular basis. I think it's incredibly valuable.
Okay, so
Yeah.
maybe we'll put that
Sorry,
into our ongoing section, but
Yeah.
it sounds like there's at least support for that.
Hey, I would just add in that I think it would be even more imperative for the session with the board, especially if we're going to merge to a new charter with new direction, then it would help, the board start establishing their expectations of it right away for the members. So, consider that as well.
Yeah, no, Corbett, you're right. And also, with the master plan going through here, I mean, that's going to be the other place we're going to need to hear from PROSTAC specifically about the master plan. This isn't, we handed it off to a consultant to do, but you, PROSTAC, helped to author this thing. So absolutely, we'll need to hear you at that meeting, maybe in a work session beforehand or whatever. I don't view this as the work of a consultant. I view it as a product of PROSTAC's input. So that's going to be at least a near touch point between PROSTAC today and the board within the next quarter. And then on a long-term basis, as Corbett alluded to, with the revised charter, I think it is really important that we touch base and everyone understand where everyone else is coming from.
Okay, we'll take you up on that.
Good.
Todd,
Yep.
excuse me, could you pull up the work plan draft? We're still looking at the trail map.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I had switched you to that. So let me do that. I apologize. I was making comments on here that I thought you were seeing. Can you see it now?
Yeah, thank you.
Do you see the red part that says Neil said this is going to happen?
I think you should put that in bold.
That's probably a good idea.
Can I add something about that? I was on a call yesterday for a national political level, and they were talking about the importance of getting creative and linking up during all of this, because it's been detrimental to the progress of groups making any progress with things. So I want to agree with that. Whatever we can do to try to make something happen in this environment, for sure.
Okay, sounds good. Next on the item was just finalizing this PROSTAC OSAC division of responsibilities. I think we're getting close to that. My hope is that in the very first part of next year, we can have this finalized through the board, all signed, sealed, and delivered. I don't think that's too far away, so hopefully we can make that happen. Neil, as far as putting something to the board on this, like you said, I don't know on the 14th if it's going to have final language, but in concept, is there any room to get this on the agenda and have one of us or you or someone bring it up and just say, hey, here's kind of where it's at, and get a litmus test from everyone on their feeling?
I don't know if we'll need to. I mean, I think if between OSAC, PROSTAC, and staff, we can get the charters revised, and then you just bring it to the meeting, the first meeting in January, and then have sort of a pitch from PROSTAC and OSAC, whether it's just the chairs or the whole membership of the committees. I think that's fine. I don't think there'll be any significant pushback. Directionally, everyone was on board. I don't think we'll see any major change.
Okay, sounds
so
good.
In other words, get it as close to done, and then you can bring it forward. Otherwise, you're not going to hear any negative pushback.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. For those of you that are mathematicians and that this is not a circular argument here, but we have to finalize the 2020 or 2021 work plan in 2021. So I don't see that it's probably going to be finalized before then, but we can come close. Then there's the PROS master plan. That's just a lot of things that are going to be in that that we're going to need to deal with as far as getting it finalized, and then throughout the year and dealing with all the things that fall out of it. So that's a big tall order that I see is probably our number one thing next year. I think that there's other things like the amenity list.
Yeah, I'm
that
sorry,
is also-
Todd, real quick.
Yep.
Like the Prost master plan and some of these things, extensively using committees to help with this or subcommittees to help with this. I think that's going to be the biggest bang for the buck. So when folks are reviewing the work plan, also consider some of the items as a potential subcommittee and whether you'd be willing to support it or lead it.
I think one thing that would be really helpful and throughout all of this is as you guys look at it, maybe go through these items and give it a 1, 2, or 3 or something on your interest level. And let's see if we, like Corbett was saying, if we have some people that are really passionate about some of these specific things, let's split up and conquer that way rather than try to everyone do everything. Because I think there's more here than we can really get done unless we do split up like he suggested. Some things that we've done, like the priority list or the amenity list for prioritizing those things, I think that's going to be kind of adjacent to the master plan. So some of those will take a little less time, hopefully. The other piece of the puzzle that I think is really big for next year is 1500 Colton and all of what that entails. And so there's just a ton of things there. I'm not sure all of what it's going to be yet, but we're going to have to kick that off in a big way. Karen, is Leslie's Karen Snortland still going to be in charge of that?
She is going to be the point staff person for that operation.
Okay, so we can coordinate some of that getting going, but the first of the year, we're going to want to jump on that one as well. And then obviously there's going to be real interesting budget recommendations coming out of this group, I think, for next year based on the master plan. Big ticket items for at least years into the future, and I don't know what that's going to look like at this point, but obviously that's the one thing that we're going to need some guidance from the board on. What do you really want from us? And so hopefully we can get that from the board as the master plan is finalized, so that we can at least know what we really should be focusing on. And then as you said, Corbett, identify the subcommittee leads that are gonna be able to split up this stuff and get it all done. So that's quarter one. Quarter two, I think there's probably a lot of budget recommendations that are going to continue as we dissect the master plan and where this is going. 1500 Colton Road, things that we think we understand that we don't. And then there's all of the typical stuff that we have for the year, the booths, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we can actually have some of those booths this next year. One thing we did not do tonight, and we really didn't do a good job of this summer, probably somewhat COVID and probably somewhat, I don't know, busy, lazy, whatever it is, but we didn't get out and walk the parks. And so I think that would be a really helpful thing to go through and understand these things intimately and in person and sitting and talking through them. So hopefully we can do that throughout next summer a little better than we did. There's weed and pest management things. There's some just check boxes that we've gone through every year and to make sure that we understand them. Third quarter, there's a conference that we didn't, I don't think anyway. Leslie, did anyone actually attend that this year?
We had some staff that attended some sessions, but that's it.
Okay, well, hopefully next year we can have it back to normal. That's fingers crossed again, but we'll see. And then as came up in the master plan discussion, there's Town 15 potential future uses. And that's going to be a huge thing in really finalizing that and that whole corridor with community park and how that all fits together. There's connectivity that we've kicked around and kind of not done anything with for a long time, and that's another thing that would be really nice, I think, to start diving in on. I'm not sure how that would go together with other groups exactly, but I think there needs to be some overall connectivity through town and wayfinding and different things that tie this all together. I think we could, do a really great job of it but it's going to be a really lot of work to do that well.
Hey,
I
Todd,
don't know.
can I jump in on that for a second? This is Marcia, because it ties to the CAPS meeting on the art walk.
Uh-huh.
Some of these same concepts were coming up on using the art walks for connecting, and there was we were talking a lot about connecting those walks to 1500 Colton and integrating that into the community, and then also integrating the art walk things with the wayfinding. And yeah, and the biggest takeaway at this point for the CAPS meeting was whether or not we were interested in formally putting it in our work plan for 2021 or just continuing more on a casual basis.
Well, I think that's a question for the group of, do we want to be a part of this? Do we want to, let another group take the lead on this and help? What's the appetite for us doing this? Because I think we do have plenty of other things to do. And I think this is really a huge project if we want to do it well for the whole town.
So I'll talk again because I was there. My take on it, being new to this committee as well, is that for some of the trail connectivity problems that are around town, it may be an opportunity by integrating with an art walk idea to solve some of those problems. But for us to have like a 50-50 active role, I think that would be asking a lot because they're looking more at, well, how can we slow down, say, bike traffic instead of, because they're talking about putting these on existing paved paths and slowing down traffic because people are going to be meandering a little more and looking at the art and things like that. And so I think it's important that we stay involved, but whether or not we have it officially in our work plan, I don't know, unless we want to make sure we have a presence on there to make sure our interests are also met.
Right. I think we for sure need to be a part of it and help those decisions be made. The thing that I wonder about is the actual wayfinding and figuring out how we want to do that, not just from an artistic standpoint, but from a logical standpoint, and what types of things we want to embed in the signage and things like that. If we're going to go after that, that's just something that feels like a lot of work to me. And I don't know if we have the bandwidth to really dig in and do it. So that's, I guess, my big question of if they have the bandwidth and they want to be a part of that, are they looking at doing any wayfinding things, Marcia, or really just a few paths that are these art walks?
The grand vision had more to do with say 4 loops interconnecting different areas of town, say from original town to downtown to the Rock Creek over to 1500 Colton. So, and obviously this would be phased in over a number of years. First phase, their goal was to do within 5 years. And as kind of a prototype going from El Dorado K through 8 over towards 1500 Colton, because there's already kind of a paved path that you could come up with.
My understanding was that there was no official wayfinding component to what that they were doing, that was not covered.
It's going to be more to,
yeah,
when we have the wayfinding, to make it a little more artistic and a little more interesting than just.
Yeah. They were not going to take that on. There was not a component of what they were doing to actually make it incorporated into, I mean, it could be once there is a wayfinding project, or if wayfinding gets done at some point, let's put the CAPS touch on it. But the artistic walking path, the mobility path, was not specifically designed around, or didn't incorporate wayfinding as a clear component.
I'm gonna ditto what the 2 ladies said, and they're doing the 4 loops and they're looking to like name the 4 loops, but I wouldn't consider it wayfinding. Another thing that they discussed was putting mileage markers down so people would know how much they've walked or biked. Yeah, and they are looking to, my understanding is they're really looking toward to us for the trails and the connectivity,
Yeah.
you know, and us to kind of guide them on where they're going to put the art. Like, okay, let us know where the trails are so then we can put the art in.
Yeah, I'll say that I was interviewed for this as well, and the conversation focused on a couple of things. Is where do we, where would we need additional trailheads if we thought we needed them? Where would we want to focus on connectivity? Areas like that. The one thing that I thought was really interesting though was what Sarah alluded to about mile markers or distances traveled on the trails, because that has a very recreation aspect to it, right? I think a lot of people, that's what I consider would be very much in the, in the interest of PROSTAC, is people would be, able to now better evaluate the distances and their workout plans if they knew where they were in the trails and how far it is and so forth.
So boiling this down to a sentence or two in a work plan, the folks that have been working with the CAPS folks, what do you think we should put down here? What do we have bandwidth for? I'm not really sure. I'm kind of struggling with what this ought to be. Any
I
thoughts?
personally think that it's something that we should find support for, but not something that to help identify things that would be useful in terms of PROSTAC needs, but not something that we really are able to lead up. Everybody said, is really our focus is trying to get the trails established first, and that's the priority.
Okay. Well, I'll try to put some verbiage around that in there.
You might just want to put it up in the top when you were talking about the subcommittees. Like, I think it could basically just be, there could be a couple people that can kind of do periodic reports back and be like a subcommittee lead for this.
Yep, that makes sense. For sure. I think a lot of these things really need to turn into that, where we can have 2 or 3 people from our group that can really lead up each of these items, and then we can come back and get the full group's input on it maybe, but I don't think we all have to be doing everything for sure. Rest of the work plan, 2022 work plan, and then some ongoing things. I don't know realistically when Parks 1 and 2 are going to come online. What's the timeline on that? Is that really, doesn't really have anything to do with 2021 probably, Neil, does it?
I don't know.
Okay.
I can probably help with that. It probably is barely going to hit 2022. So
Okay.
The park construction should be done in 22, but that doesn't mean the grass is going to be grown in and ready to use.
So as far as this point, existing in 2021, can I strike that out? Or is that going to have anything to do?
I think that the park is pretty well designed and planned out. I think looking at the programming, planning what we want to do with the space might be something you could address even in 2022. So yeah.
Okay, so it seems like it's probably the year beyond that. And so there's this future indoor space downtown in the town center. What's the timeline on that? Does that have anything to do with 2021? I don't think so, but I just want to make sure it doesn't.
It likely does not, but what we had talked about, a year ago, I think, before the pandemic, was a community engagement survey on what we thought, or a community just engagement on what we thought that space could be utilized as or for. Since that's likely, going to be pushed out, I don't know that there's any urgency for 2020.
It seems like we're going to do a lot of learning on 1500 Colton.
Yeah.
And based on that learning, in 2021, probably be able to go after that better in 2022. It seems like 2021 is going to be our learning year and figuring out with what we have before we really can think too much about what we want in the future.
Yeah, and I think, at the end of the day, ranch I think they're working on trying to find some partners to get this thing moving. They do see the project moving forward. It's just a question of, how fast. So it may be something that has to get thrown back into the blender, maybe in Q4 if we start to see some substantial movement from the capital markets under construction. So
Okay,
that-
I'll leave that as a placeholder in the ongoing. And then really, there's going to be a lot of ongoing master plan things, as I said before. That's got so many aspects to it. That's going to keep us super busy. Are there any big things we're missing on this
One
list?
addition, and it was missing from Mike's overview, is the sort of, I don't want to call it a pocket park, but it's the toll playground at the end of Coal Creek going north, because it's definitely bigger than the typical pocket park. This is going to be built by Ranch Capital and Toll. It's going to be right next to Tract H. I want to make sure that PROSTAC has the opportunity to weigh in on the amenities that go there.
Yeah, and so this is east side.
Yeah.
Weren't we calling that Zone 5 or something like
Yeah.
that? Zone, a special number.
Yeah, it was Zone 3 for a long time. And I don't really know where Zone 3 came from. I think Corey and I were
Zone
talking
3 is
about it.
Riverbend Park, so you might want to be
Yeah.
careful with throwing
Yeah.
Zone 3
Well,
around.
I know when that was invented was a discussion, and we just kind of split things up, and it became Zone 3. So I don't know if there's any significance to that.
Yeah, I think given all the different names that people have reactions to, anything that says Tract H and Park might be a problem as well. Maybe it's just, I don't know, Coal Creek North Park or Toll Development Park. And it's something that orients it to where it is. It's not in the buffer so much as it's right by the end of the buffer.
Okay.
There you go.
For amenities and for it to be not as intrusive looking and as a playground is the Broomfield Bike Park has an awesome playground, but it doesn't look like a playground. It's got like underground tunnels and it's really cool. I'll try to I'll find the link and some pictures and send it to the group. And I think it might be more palatable for the people that are living off of Tract H, because I know they're probably going to get upset about having a playground near Tract H.
Is there any real planning that's gone into that yet, or is it just kind of some rough, hey, there's a playground here and a picnic table there? Neil, do you know?
It was some hand-drawn sketches, for the FDP, which, given the level of detail that goes into everything else in an FDP, it was pretty much, a napkin sketch on this is where we think a park can fit. And this is where and how we think it's going to work. And probably doing a disservice to calling it a napkin sketch. It's probably more than that, but there weren't a lot of specifics on what type of amenities would go in there. Now, as far as timeline goes, we all thought this was going to be a year or two out from now. Toll has moved their development project forward by quite a bit. I think anyone who's paying attention has seen the housing market go through the roof. Superior has not missed out on that. So I think everybody who's trying to build a home is trying to build it faster, and Toll is no different. And they're pulling a good chunk of their project forward. So this park, what we heard from Ranch, looks to be likely it'll be ready for construction this year, 2021.
So this is something, sounds like if we're going to have any involvement in making some of those decisions, it's going to be a Q1 or Q2 thing if it's going to be built this year.
I think so, and Leslie would probably know a heck of a lot more than I would in terms of actual specifics. The town is planning, at least in the budget, the Promenade Road extension. We're going to build that this year, 2021, this summer, to connect to the road work that Toll will be doing. And this new road that'll connect to 88th Street is going to basically go right by this park. So in my head, if we're building the road, then the park can all get built at the same time.
Okay, well, I'll move that up the list then, because that's definitely something we'll want to have some input on.
Yeah.
Okay, any big things that we've missed on this?
Not a big thing, but you might want to call out specifically renaming the committee, and maybe earlier.
Yeah, probably should do that before Q4.
Didn't you have a name, Dan? Something? I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm voting for Catfur if you want to just vote for that tonight.
Well, we could do that if we wanted to. Any other folks?
I thought we
had
had a
whole bunch of
list going
brainstorms
last time.
week in the chat.
Yeah, we did. I didn't know
those?
if any of those were serious or not though last time.
Yes, they were.
I know, because now I can't remember them, but there were some goodies in there.
Hey, we got really close to naming Coyote Ridge the open space, mixed space face, open, I forgot the name. But, you know, so if anyone has anything super creative, we've got, you know, a board that is very receptive to crazy names. It was open, mixed space, face, open space, I think is what it was.
That has to go with that Shippy ship face that went viral a couple
Should be
years ago.
McShipperson or whatever his name was.
It was Bodie McBoatface, which
Bodie
they didn't.
McBoat-
Bodie
Boatface.
McBoatface, that's it.
They didn't name the boat, but they named the dinghy Bodie McBoatface. So we came out of it. We may name a trail the open space, mixed space face, open space, whatever. But we didn't name Coyote Ridge that. So be bold.
Well, if there's any ideas, throw them out there for sure. Just send them to the PROSTAC group. We can take a poll and see what we come up with. And I will clean this up, this document, send it out again. And then if you guys can maybe just shoot back another copy of it to me with your 1, 2, and 3, you're really interested, not so interested on things that would be helpful. And let's declare 1 being what you're interested in and 3 what you're not, so we can help put that in the right order. And if there's nothing else on this has got a long way to go to get finalized, but I'll send it out and let's go through that at our next meeting as well and see if we can't come to some conclusion on that and maybe a name as well by the next meeting. Moving on to updates and look ahead. We had CAPS Ormond Roche Trailhead project. Is there anyone have an update on that? I don't remember when they were going to be making decisions on artists and all of that stuff, but they wanted some input from us. Did anyone get involved in any of that?
I can give a short update.
Okay.
They did select an artist. They are gonna move that recommendation forward to the board on December 14th. The really nice part about this artist is he's proposing that the art gets installed not directly at the trailhead, but more near where the driveway comes into the parking lot along that ridge. His art is basically 5 very large circles or rings that can be seen from McCaslin. It'll kind of be like an entryway to the park, to that trailhead. The idea is that you would be able to walk on a short path down and take pictures. You could do selfies in the ring and get the mountains in the background, but it does not obstruct the view from the parking lot or from the trailhead in any way. It's also not on Boulder County open space, so we don't have to jump through those hoops. So I think that the art selection and the location is good. We do have to be really careful with the trail work. So he's proposing not really a trail, but a pathway that would kind of incorporate all 5 rings so people could walk down to that area.
So not that I'm not very interested in that because I live nearby, but based on our charter going forward, I think that's something we can probably say that is going to be OSPAC's responsibility from now on. Is that based on where it is and what we talked about, Leslie? Does that make sense?
I think it does. It's more of just making sure you all are aware of it, and that's about it. So.
Okay, thank you for the update. I'm envisioning when you say 5 rings, like it's the Ormond Roche Olympic trailhead now.
Something like that. They're a little bit more spread out.
I had written down here the art path update in the look ahead. Is there anything more than what we talked about when we talked about the work plan to go through there?
I think we covered it.
Okay. Staff updates. You want to give us the rundown on these things, Leslie?
Sure. Let's see. Pickleball is up and running, and let's see if I can share my screen real quick. I don't do this very often. Well, now you're getting the pictures of Colton Road. Here we go. Does anybody
So I don't think we
Can you
can see your screen yet.
How about there?
There we go.
Yeah, so pickleball's been a big hit. We've pretty much finalized the project. Obviously the grass coming in is going to take time, and it's not a good time of the year to grow grass. So they put down the straw blankets, but it's getting some good use out there. People are being really considerate, adhering to the COVID guidelines. So if you get a sunny day and you have a pickleball paddle, wander on down there. There's usually somebody to play with. So just wanted to share that as a success that's been going on. And then if anybody has not been into Colton Road lately, they have all the studs up. They're putting in drywall starting Wednesday, tomorrow, or today, I guess. But it really is starting to take shape. This kind of shows the seating area, that stadium seating, and this is the cafe. So some real interesting work that's going on there. This is the mezzanine floor, and see if there's another good one you might want to see. This is kind of the in between the open area and the front lobby. This is some of where the restrooms are going to go. So that project is moving along very quickly.
And just to add on to what Leslie's kind of talked about with 1500 Colton, SYLC named the teen area The Spot.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And then real quick, just to give you an update on Parks 1 and 2, I suppose eventually we're going to need to come up with a better name for these, but the bids came in actually under expectation, which was really nice. So we had some bid alternates that we were able to add back in, but there's going to be 3 water crossings here, and down here over the creek. This is the athletic field, which will have lights. There's a playground that is going to have a water feature, an embankment slide, a playground structure. This is kind of the amphitheater area. There's going to be just a concrete pad down here that'll have capability of, if you needed to plug in sound system or something like that down there, and people could sit in the grass here. So this is moving along. They bid the park and the Marshall Bridge out together. So this roadway and bridge, they're going to start earth moving probably in 2 weeks. So you'll see stuff going on out there. The bridge will be one of the first things to go in. There will be some detours of the pathway, and there'll probably be a couple days where they actually have to close it down when they set the bridge abutments in. But we'll try and make sure we get some good notification out on all of that. Athletic field, there's a restroom here, and there's also a restroom over here in a small plaza area. Anybody have any questions? This park will probably take a year to build out. and it'll get done in late 22. We might be able to open up some of the areas in 22, but probably the spring of 23 is when it's really going to come into full utilization.
So aside from the future programming that's going to hopefully go on there, what things are needed from this group?
At this point, I think that's going to be it. Is just looking at, you know, do we want to bring things like Chili Fest down here? Does that morph into a new kind of event? Are there other things we want to do here? You know, some of that may not fall within your group. It may fall within the CAPS group, but certainly there's an opportunity. One of the things that this area does not have are picnic shelters or grills. Once it gets built and we see what the utilization is, we may decide we need to come back in and add those. But I think it's going to be a pretty heavily used park, especially once downtown gets built out. And there should be some events that we can coordinate between this open space and the downtown plaza open space.
So knowing that one of the feedback items or complaints or whatever you want to call it is that there's no shade in a lot of areas. Now we're building a park with little baby trees and no shade structures. Is that something to be rethought out and maybe put some of those in at the get-go rather than after the fact?
Well, the get-go's already happened, but yes, I think that maybe phase 2, it could be something that we need to come back in and look at. There is quite a few areas that have slope on them, so they may or may not be great for shade structures, but there's definitely some opportunities, you know, on some of the flatter areas where we might be able, like right here would be a perfect spot. This is really flat, and there might be some opportunities in this area as long as we stay out of that floodplain. So, yes. Trees do take a long time.
Leslie, this creek is being designed for families and kids to walk around and play in, correct? Because that's
Yeah,
kind of the feel I get when I'm down there with my kids.
Yeah, I mean, the creek the creek edge is going to be pretty much how it is today, with the exception of there's probably going to be some disturbance, you know, and it might look a little different when the bridge goes in and where these low water crossings go in. But yes, we fully expect people to be walking along the edge, and you know, it's a fairly low flow through there, so kids get in the water all the time.
And it seems like the creek is built with like kind of large pool areas. Like, you know, there's like a step, like there's some big boulders, kind of like a step down, and there's like a huge pool area, and then it kind of narrows again.
Yeah, they did a nice job when they did the realignment to create some areas where it's easier to get to the water's edge.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
But I will say that the playground area is going to have a water feature in it that's going to be probably more for younger kids who may be getting into the creek is you know, a little bit too much for them. Is they can have some water play up here in this area. Okay, well, good. I think that's all my updates.
Let's see, community center. How about Autry Park Creek work? What's that?
Okay, that I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that Mile High Flood District is doing some work on the creek bed there in Autry Park. What they're doing is really to improve the edges of the creek so that it won't flood as much. and it won't collect debris as much. So they're going to be doing that over the next month or so, and you will see some dirt moving. You're probably going to see some realignment, temporary realignment of the trail that's just next to the bike park. And
When we last talked about that, it sounded like we were going to lose some land on the east side of the creek towards the pickleball courts. Do we know how much is going to be lost in there?
no, and they are going to have to push the trail just a little bit closer to the pickleball courts there. I don't think it's going to be a whole lot, but keeping the trail on the flat area and not on the slope is going to require that it does get pushed just a little bit.
Okay, and one other thing that that was a question on the crusher fine is just kind of an update on that, what we're going to do on that. Do we want to keep pursuing it? All those things. So I know we went and got a second quote, Leslie.
Yeah, and the second quote came out just almost right in the same ballpark as the first quote. I think it was just over 13,600 to do that crusher, just to do the design, not the build of the trail, but the design work for the trail along McCaslin. And it just is turning out to be a whole lot more expensive, I think, than anyone expected. Part of it is that area does have a drop off there is a significant slope right along the edge of the existing hard surface trail. So it would require some engineering and construction documents and all those kind of things. So it's more expensive than expected. How you guys want to move forward with that? We could start looking for grants. We could have a couple different strategies for trying to secure funding for that.
I'm not sure. I think we could move this into the work plan for next year, but I'm just wondering if we could try to figure out why it is so expensive, kind of like what you were saying for, are we trying to engineer a trail halfway up the hill or something, as opposed to like, could we just say, well, could you identify the locations where we could just add a foot or 2 foot of crusher fine right along the side of the existing trail, to prevent the huge expense. So like if there are areas that are going to be really expensive to do, could we just leave those out?
And that was the direction that I did give to this last group, was that the crusher fine trail could be directly next to the existing trail, and that if it occasionally needed to merge back together, if there was an obstacle or a section where it didn't work, that they could merge the two, and they still came back with that high price. So I don't know why it's so expensive. I think it's just the cost of doing business. It's the cost of engaging an engineering firm.
So Dan, what are your thoughts on moving forward? Should we put a bullet point in this for next year and, right now just kind of put a placeholder that we're going to deal with it, or are there specific things right now we want to go after?
I don't think there's anything else we should try to do this year on myself.
Okay. Anything else we've missed?
You did have grants down on the staff updates.
Oh, yes, thank you.
So update on the 2 grants that we have submitted to Colorado Park and Wildlife. We did get a bounce back on the grant that was for the soft surface trail through Autry Park, and also it included the trailhead amenities for Ormond Roche. We also received funding from the board this year to do the amenities at Orme and Roche. So that piece is not going to get lost. But we did not get funding for the soft surface trail through Autry. So that particular grant package was declined. I have not heard anything further on the master plan, the grant for the Trails master plan for CenturyLink, now Coyote Ridge. So I'm hopeful that since I haven't gotten a ding letter, that one is going to move forward. Keeping my fingers crossed. We also just submitted a sustainability grant to Boulder County. And the project we selected, because we had a very short timeline to turn this in, 24 hours basically. We decided to put in a grant application to expand our goat grazing operation. So it would basically triple the amount of goat grazing that we did last year for next year. And we have not heard back on that grant yet. Allison was working on a grant for an outdoor learning area and community park, which was going to be really fun. It was going to provide some additional shade and seating, public Wi-Fi, and an area where people could go and do their homework on their own, or even classes. The schools could use it for outdoor classrooms. Staff could use it for outdoor programming. That got declined. So that was kind of a bummer, but we do have all the plans and concepts if we wanted to move forward with that as a potential CIP project for the future.
Yeah, well, we can keep our fingers crossed for the CenturyLink one.
Yeah, I think that one has a lot of potential, so I'm still hopeful.
Okay, thanks for the update, Leslie. Any last items that we missed? So moving forward to December, we are planning on having a meeting on the 16th. I'm not sure, based on what Mike said, if we're going to have another update or what that's going to be exactly, because it'll be a couple of days after the board meeting. So we'll kind of stay tuned on that, I guess. But I'd like to at least have another meeting, maybe not as long as this, and try to finalize, if at all possible, the splitting of responsibilities with OSAC, maybe some naming, if we can get some good names in the hat to pick out and vote on, and have this be a done deal by the end of the year. So if we're going to do that, we have to really put that on the 16th. We have traditionally had a dinner around the holiday times, and I think the right answer for that is to punt on that and push it into next year, and hope we could have it sometime not too far into next year. But at this point, I don't think that makes any sense to try to do. I guess we could all have bring a pumpkin pie to our Zoom call or something on the 16th. I don't know, but at this point, I don't think we're going to have any formal get together, and it's one of those years that we will all remember in various ways. Dan, do you have our 3 sentences?
I do. I said, received an update on the PROST master plan, including concept proposal ideas for Town 15 North and South pools. Discussed OSAC and PROSTAC committee responsibility proposal and moving forward plan, and reviewed first draft of the proposed 2021 work plan.
Yeah, I think that covers most of it. Thank you, Dan, for always putting those together. You do a great job, and for taking our notes. If there's nothing else, I think we will have the meeting be adjourned, and you guys all have a very happy Thanksgiving.
You too, thanks.
Stay
you guys.
safe, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.